Hi everybody, welcome back. This is part 40 now of our Trumpeter 200 scale hood build. In this video I'm hoping to complete the forecastle deck that I started in part 39. We just have some breakwaters to fit, mushroom vents and hatches. So a lot of this work I've done before, particularly the hatches and preparing the mushroom vents. But there are a couple of different hatches which I'll build on camera. The mushroom vents I won't go through again. We've done plenty of those elsewhere on the ship, on both the shelter deck and the quarter deck, so I won't repeat that. We've also got a few winches to build, and again I've done those before, so I'll just get over and get those done off camera. Okay, so I want to get these 6 hatches out of the way. This is the type with the blast plates on. So these edges just fold down at a slight angle, they don't go square. So with these it's just a case of adjusting the edges until they meet up. I will seal that with a bit of solder. And these edges are 90 degrees. So just get a bit of flux in the corners. Once we've got the inside of the box folded up, I can put the lid down and just go along just one side just to seal it up and hold it down. That's enough. We've got a little bracket on these for a davit or a hoist, just like we did on the quarter deck. I just want to mount this on the blast plate. So I need to do this without moving the part at all. I'll give it a clean up before I just put the hatch on. So some thick super glue for the hatch. Actually I'd forgotten here, I just need to bend these hinges down. That just helps locate the part in the correct position, and just make sure to get the hinge at the right end of the hatch. And once it's on the lid, we can just bend the dogs up. The last job is just to fit this little frame onto the top of the hatch. I think this was a folding frame. It would have stood up like that, I guess, but it's stowed down on the model, or I'm stowing them anyway. Do this big one next. I'm not sure what this part is. All I can think of is that it's an alternative lid. It's exactly the same size as the lid that appears to be the one we need, but other than that I can't really see what the purpose of it is. And Pontos don't give us any instructions on exactly how to build this particular hatch, so I'm just going to build it as it's photographed in the completed model on the Pontos website. Okay, so that's all the skylights and hatches done. I thought there were just these 6 at the front of the forecastle deck, and then unfortunately I turned the page over to find that there are another 5 to build. So anyway, they're all done now. There's 11 of those skylights and hatches here. Something that I didn't mention in the intro was these parts here. These are called cat heads, and I'll explain the positioning of them and what they did when we come over to fit them to the model. This one's made up, it's just 2 parts from the Pontos set. So we'll make the other one up now. There's one either side, and it's quite a simple thing to make really. We just have this central part which folds back on itself, and I just want to tack it with a drop of super glue. We'll come to solder the base and the 2 parts together when it's all in position, but this will just hold it for now. This part is slightly more complicated. This is the stand, if you like, and it's got a few more bends to it. Again, these are very, very fragile with a Pontos style dotted line folds, so we just get one chance at them really. So this is the bracket which fits to the deck, and just get those through 90 degrees. And the next thing I'm going to do is fold the sides down, and there's a very thin, sort of 1/2 millimeter really, fold to make, and that's so it leaves this central strip and makes the 2 sides slightly separate, and it just enables the first part that we made here to slot inside. And then there are a couple of wings. They're kind of brackets that hold the cat head up. So we finish up with a structure something like that, and then the first part that we made slots inside. And all I'm going to do is get that in position, and I'll hold it with some tweezers, and then I'll solder the bottom, so a bit of flux. And this is the part that sits on the deck, so I just want to make sure it's absolutely flat. And once the whole thing's firmly fixed together, you can just do the last adjustments to these side supports. So that's the other cat head. You might have noticed these are the replacement fair leads for the bow. These are from Pontos resin, and as we had on the quarterdeck, these have got the bulge moulded or cast into them underneath. So we're probably going to have to remove a little bit of the trumpeter plastic when we come to fit these. They're very thin, the bases, so we just need to be careful taking them off the block. Don't be tempted to try and snap these off once you've got so far through, because they probably will break. The Pontos resin I've mentioned before is very brittle, so you just have to be patient and go through with the saw. And then once they're off the block, just need to clean up the last remnants of resin from underneath. There we are. It's a slightly peculiar shape. I need to be careful with that, it's broken, look. Now fortunately resin does repair very well. So we'll just have to hope that that will do the job, and I'll just have to remember that that is very, very delicate. Some of the Pontos resin's actually quite a bit rough. It's not the best resin I've seen. There's a slight air bubble just at the edge there that I'm going to have to try and fix. It's just not quite cast as neatly as the best resin moulding. But on the other hand, they are better than the Trumpeter. examples. And finally, for these bits of resin, we've got these 4 bollards here, which again I just want to cut off with the razor saw. I slightly underestimated this forecastle deck in that it's got an awful lot more parts than I'd probably appreciated, but a lot of them I'm not going to build, or I'm not going to do video coverage in this episode, and that's because for a lot of them I've built them before, and I don't want to repeat myself when I've already built things like the winches, which I've just spent a couple of hours doing for the forecastle. But when I come to fit them, I'll just give you a link to the video where I first built the part. So if you're trying to follow the build and do the model for yourself, you'll be able to look back and see the construction of, say, the winch type A. I did that a long time ago when I did the funnel bases. In the meantime, these are taking quite a lot of time this week to get ready. It has set up. I'm just wondering if I can clean that edge up. That'll have to do. It's just got the rough edge off, but I don't want to alter the shape of the part altogether. So I'll leave well alone with that. Sometimes you just got to know when to stop. Okay, so we've got all the rest of the parts ready. I've got to do these breakwaters now. These parts are for the forward breakwater, which has a door in it. In fact, they all have doors in. And I've made up the aft breakwater, which goes alongside the B-bar bit. And again, that's in 4 pieces with a door. So I've just got the port section to make, and I've saved this because I've worked out what I think is the best technique. It's the best technique for me anyway to build these, because you'll see on the back they have all these brackets which are pretty tricky to say the least. And I've used a combination of glue and solder for them. I didn't think it'd be possible, for me at any rate, to solder all of these together, so I've glued them in the main and just soldered on the ends just to tack them down, and it seemed to come out okay anyway. It's fairly neat. So I'll just describe the method that I use for that on this last part here, and then we'll come back and assemble the whole of the forward breakwater, which I'm hoping will be slightly more simple. It looks more complicated, but actually there are fewer of these brackets to fit, which are the main issue when you're trying to build these things. So these sections, the main actual part of the breakwater, comes in 2 halves, and all I've done with that is put them together with some flux to hold them together, and then I've just gone round the outside with the soldering iron just to seal the outsides, and some of that solder will carry into the flux which is on the inside of the 2 faces, and it's enough to hold that quite firm. We don't need any more than that. And then there's an upper and a lower flange. This is the upper flange. It's got a slight curve on it at the end to match the curvature of the breakwater, and there's this which is just flat. And actually the flange at the bottom is your best friend when you're doing these, because it allows you to line up the brackets, so that will fit on top there, and the brackets join the back of the breakwater to the these brackets on the base, or which fit to the deck. So you can see that these match up. So we have a groove in the back of the breakwater here and a groove in the flange base here, and they all match up. This bottom one is a help because it enables us to get everything nice and square. So these brackets, which are these here, sit at 90 degrees, and that's a great help because it just allows you to line everything up knowing that they've got to be perpendicular. So what I do, or what I have done, is get the middle two brackets and fit those to the breakwater, and then that allows us to drop the breakwater down onto the base and get it all set up at the right angle. So these are the two centre brackets, and there is a correct way around for these. Obviously one edge is generally a different size to the forward edge. The bottom of these parts is this one with the slight curvature on the back of the angle. It's very difficult. Some of them look almost equilateral triangles, but they're not. So I've just got some medium super glue, and I'll just dab the front of the bracket and they just fit in place into the groove with the glue and get it roughly perpendicular to the breakwater, like that. That's all we do with that. And similarly with the next bracket. And try and get it into the slot. The slot just provides that little tiny bit of extra support. It's not much, but it does help. And again, get that perpendicular to the breakwater, and then that sits down on the base like that. Not putting all three brackets on, or all four brackets, just helps us to stabilize the part. And then I only put super glue on one face, the forward face that fits to the breakwater, so we can go in now and just add a little bit of, this is thin super glue, onto the bottom of the bracket. Just help it along a bit. So that's the first step. I can now go ahead and fit the other two brackets in place. The inner one's quite tricky because it's got a compound angle to it. And secure it. Then we'd need to do this final bracket, which is the awkward one. What I haven't mentioned is that these brackets don't sit at 90 degrees, and that's because the breakwater, when it's fitted, slopes forward, so it's not perpendicular to the deck, and that's why we've got these strange angles. And then with this inboard bracket, it sits at an angle as well, so it's quite a complex shape to get to fit. And I'm going to use some large tweezers for this, these flat nosed ones or round nosed ones. It's a bit counterintuitive actually in handling small parts. I think I tend to go straight for the fine tweezers, but they're actually less effective than these broad nosed ones. The part's a lot more secure in that. So again, we've got the glue on the face. You can see the angle of it is quite complex, and Pontos have done well to get that angle correctly, because it does fit perfectly when it's in the right position. Now the hardest thing with these is fitting this top flange, and this is where we need the help of a bit of solder. So what I'll do is just tack this part when I stop dropping it. Just going to tack this part to the top flange, and then I'll just put a drop of solder on the ends just to hold it in position. I might obscure this, it's not easy to do these things on camera. So now that I've got that top flange located, I'm just going to lock it with some solder at the bottom end here where it curves down. Just a tiny drop. That's enough. And I want a little bit on the front end as well. The reason for soldering this top flange here and locking it is because when we bend these brackets down, there's a tendency to want to twist the top flange off, whereas soldering it just completely locks it. It can't move, even though it's only actually soldered at either end. So these 4 fingers need to come down onto the brackets that we fitted earlier, and I'll do those one at a time and solder them just at the bottom end. So I'll do each one in turn by putting a little bit of flux on the underside. That's all it needs. The problem with these is to try and hold them in position. Because they're all strange angles, it's very difficult to get them to lock in the tweezers. So I'm just going to do this bottom one. And just work my way along, do the second one. With those in place, I can just go back and just clean up the bit of solder that we've got on the top of those flanges. We don't want to go mad with that, otherwise we'll just crack the solder open again and we'll be back to square one. So just a few swipes, that's all it needs. Just as usual, just give this a bit of a clean up with the fiberglass pencil. So those are the 4 after breakwater pieces, port and starboard. I've just got to add the doors to those. That's these parts here, and they just need to be folded back on themselves. And again, I'll just solder these up, just a bit of flux in the middle. So Pontos would have us fit these doors in this sort of position here. So they can't have been hinged, they must have just come off brackets and bestowed in this sort of position, which is a bit strange. I would have thought there'd have been just like a gate and hinged probably to this side. And the doors have a little flange on top as well. Okay, so that's the aft breakwater ready for painting. We'll take a look now at this main or forward breakwater. We've got this very large part here. What I'm going to do is, rather than solder these together flat and then try and bend them to shape, I'm going to bend each one separately. So I want to get the correct shape for each separate part and then solder them together afterwards. And the reason for that is that if I soldered these flat like that and then I came to try and bend them, they'd be very difficult to bend, and they'd probably twist a little bit as well. So I don't want to do that. I'll fold each one up separately, and I'll use this bottom flange or base to get the correct angle of the bend. So we'll just have to do this by eye. So bend and test. That looks pretty good. I'll do the same for the front facing part as well. Okay, that's okay. And these should fall together now, which they do, so I'm getting a good contact on those. It's much better doing it like that. So as we did before, I'll put some flux on these faces and then assemble the parts. We have to try and keep these flat because it's important to try and keep these lined up, because if we don't, we'll introduce a twist into them and that'll be quite difficult to get out once it's in. Okay, so after quite a bit of soldering around the edges, I've got that fixed enough to be able to move forward with it, and we've managed to just keep the shape that we need onto this base plate. I think I'll do it in sections. It's a bit too big to do all at once. So that's pretty well in position. The hard thing is to get the reveal the same all the way along, by which I mean the flange sticking out by the same amount all the way along the piece. So these are trumpeter parts, enormous lockers which fit onto the inside, and that's another test of whether or not we've got the angle right. So obviously they won't fit unless the angle's correct, but it is. So I can do the brackets now, just 4 of them, thank goodness. Okay, now for the fun bit, which is putting the top flange on. Okay, so that with its two partners here and here will form the forward breakwater, and we've got these two huge lockers which go in the corners like that, and we have some doors to fit to this, and we've also got the doors to the access openings. I will fit these lockers once we've got the breakwater on the ship. I think it will just enable us to line things up a little bit better. But I will put the doors on these lockers. I suppose you could have them open. That would involve drilling out, opening out the end of the locker here. But I don't want to do that. You just see nothing inside it anyway. I recall seeing a model actually with these doors open, but there'd been a little bit of an error in it because there's a mushroom vent located very close to these doors, and what had happened was it had been assembled with this door open but on the wrong side of the mushroom vent, so it wouldn't be been possible to close it again. So these little details just sometimes catch us out. But I've played safe, and obviously the doors are closed on mine, so I'm not going to run into any problems like that. So those are our breakwaters. But I think that's all the parts done now. I've prepared all the mushroom vents, which are these. There are 20 of the small ones alone, and another dozen or so of different sized ones, all for the forecastle deck. And these are all our parts that we've prepared, all the reels, which I did off camera, the hatches that we built at the beginning of the video, and also the last of the winches that I've built off camera as well. So the A-type and the B-type here. So they can all be primed now and painted, and we'll get over and fit them to the model. Okay, I'm going to make a start and get some of these parts fitted. I'm going to start with the mushroom vents, but I'm not going to do those on camera. There's just too many, and I've done them plenty of times before on the rest of the ship, so I'll just get through and whiz through those, and then we can come back to some more interesting stuff. Right, so that's all the mushroom vents done. I've got a few spare, but I think that's just the way that Trumpeter do the mouldings with the sprues. They do multiple sprues with several parts on each one. So there must be an odd number somewhere along the line. Anyway, I think I've got them all. So I can fit the hatches now, all here on the forecastle. And I want to do that before I fit the breakwaters, and that's really because if I fit the breakwaters first, they lean forward and it'll just obstruct fitting these two. It'll just be easier to get these two particularly in now, so that's what I'll do. I'm using the MIG glue for this, and I just want to get into the corners or along the edge, because when we fitted the blast plate for these, it makes the inside of the part hollow, so there's not an awful lot of contact point. But this MIG glue is pretty strong stuff, so you don't need an awful lot of it. I've just noticed actually that where we've got the blast plates on these skylights, Pontos have provided a cutout in the deck, and that's just to allow us to butt the hollow blast plate up against the deck, and it gives us a bit more glue surface, whereas the hatches with the flat bottoms just go directly down onto the deck. Right, so that's all the hatches. Put the winches on next. And these are slightly different. The actual winch drum is on different sides on some of them. Now these positions are not marked on the Pontos deck, so we just need to be a little bit careful how we fit them. Okay, the next job is to fit all the reels that we did. This should be the last of the reels. I like the way I keep on saying the last. It means I'm getting towards the end, hopefully. Building something like this is quite an investment in terms of time, as well as money, of course. It's an expensive kit to put together, but I've been doing this for 9 months now, just about. So in terms of pounds per mile, it's not too bad, but it's also an investment in time, and I haven't built anything else for the best part of 9 months. So I suppose the thing to have, you've got to have a bit of stamina to carry on building when it's just the same thing, and often it doesn't look much different to the week before. So you just need to press on with it. Okay, that's all the reels fitted, apart from 2 which go on the bridge base here, just behind the shield. I'm not going to fit those yet because I need to fit the paravane underneath, and I just want to make sure that I've got enough clearance for those. I can go ahead now and fit the forward breakwater. I'm not going to use an awful lot of glue on this, just 1 or 2 strategic dabs. And just do any clean-up straight away. I've got a tiny little bit of glue on the deck there. I'll fit the outboard sections next. And I just want to eyeball that just to make sure it's in line. The aft breakwater butts up against the barbette, and the angle on the Pontos part's perfect to do that. There's no glue on the section of the breakwater where it butts up, and that's just because I think I would have marred the barbette. Put the lockers in now, these large lockers. I'm going to stick with the MIG Ultra. Just make sure that they're going to fit. They're a nice fit actually, those. You might notice that I've still not refitted the fairing here along the side of the deck, which allowed the degaussing coil to rise up over the hosepipe openings. So that's another job I'm going to have to do before the bow's completely finished. But I'll put these fair leads on. I've trimmed away the bulge from underneath on the Trumpeter kit. Obviously this is all going to need touching in with the grey after filling and blending the bulge on the Pontos resin part. So just fitted the two cat heads that we built earlier, one either side, although they're not level with each other on the deck. The port one's slightly forward. The cat heads were actually devices. When the anchors were not in the hose pipes, they were slung from the cat heads underneath here, presumably ready to be deployed. You'll see them more clearly on old sailing ships. I built a model of the Victory, and the cat heads were the two beams that stuck out on the bow of the ship, and all the anchors were slung from those cat heads. But they're obviously a lot different in modern times. They don't look like that at all, but they perform the same function. On the Victory model that I built, they also have what are called cattails, which was a beam going across, joining the two cat heads on the ship. It went across the deck from port to starboard. What it's got to do with cats, I don't know. But there we are, a bit of naval folklore. I'm sure someone somewhere will know why they're called cat heads and cat tails. So that's the bow done, more or less. We've just got a little bit of work to do. I've got to fair in the fair leads at the front, but apart from that I think we're done with all the detailing, and the ship looks very busy at this stage. Right, so we're done with the bow. This lovely bow on this ship. It's a beautiful shape. It was one of the three sections actually that was found by the expedition to discover the location of the wreck. It's laying on its port side, but the prow here with this lovely shape at the front is unmistakable. And as I said, it's lying on its side with the anchor chains draped down over the side of the ship, and it's fractured probably around about here, I think, just in front of the A-bar bit. Presumably the explosion that destroyed the back of the ship carried forward and detonated the forward magazines as well and blew this middle section out. So there's the bow section, as I said, lying on its port side. And it's worth having a look at some of the video images for the wreck. They're really quite interesting to have a look at. So coming up next week, I'm going to move on and do the main armament at last. 4 turrets obviously to build, but they're each quite different. The B turret has the UP mounting, the 5th UP mounting on it, and the X turret has the old remnants of the flying off platform fitted to it as well, so the framework for the old flying off platform. The A and Y turrets are possibly a bit more simple. They're very similar to each other, but we'll hopefully get all 4 done. I'm not absolutely certain, but I'll do my best to get all 4 done and get fitted to the ship next week. So that'll be coming up as part 41 next Friday as usual. So I hope to see you for that one. In the meantime, have a great week everybody. Stay safe, and I'll see you in another 7 days. Bye for now.